Live at lesliemarshallshow.com.
Here to set you free. How you doing? Happy Tuesday. I'm Leslie Marshall. Welcome back to the only true democracy in talk. We thank you for listening wherever you get us, on radio, on live stream, on podcast, on iTunes, iHeartRadio, all of them. We're on everywhere. We're glad you listen, but we also are glad that you watch on Twitter, now X, also on Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, all of that. And we're glad that you participate. And we're also glad that this woman is joining us today, and that she and the organization that she works for and is speaking on behalf of today represent so many people, so many workers, so much of our population, that middle working class. Today, we have Maria Sommab, organizing director for the United Steelworkers, on. She's been an organizer for her entire career. First, she was a community organizer, then she was a labor organizer. She started the Steelworkers back in 2001 as a healthcare workers organizer, and she became organizing director back in 2015. We had Maria previously on the show. She was such an excellent guest. We said we got to have her back, and we're thrilled to have her back today. In the meantime, check out all that the USW does. Go to usw.org. Be sure to follow them and find out opportunities for not just jobs for you, but how to unionize, or all that the unions are doing. Follow them on X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at Steelworkers. On Facebook, go to facebook.com/Steelworkers. And once again, their website is usw.org. Maria, thank you for joining us today. Glad to have you back on the show. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Lots to be thankful for, and we're going to talk about some of that.
Yes, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be back.
Well, I think that when you look at the economy, right, throughout the entire economy, workers throughout the economy, the middle class, the working class, whether they're in the background that you had, which, was in healthcare, or healthcare specifically with the USW, automakers, what we're seeing is people thankful for their power, right? And specifically their collective power, that power to ensure that they have fair contracts, they're getting paid a decent wage, and that they have safe working conditions. It's interesting. I'm into this show. I used to be into Downton Abbey, and I'm into this show on HBO called The Gilded Age. And it's Julian Fellows who did Downton Abbey. But right now and I don't want to be a spoiler alert person, out there, but right now they've got the rich of the rich, who are living along Central Park back in New York in, I think, the late early 1900s, starting to butt heads with their workers, who are simply saying, we want an 8-hour workday, 8 hours of sleep, and 8 hours to do what we want. And one of the guys said, what's so bad about that? And it's just interesting how far back unions have been fighting, and workers have been fighting across the economy, whether, it was not automakers back then, or healthcare workers, different trades, but still using their collective power to ensure they have fair contracts and safe working conditions. This is not as old as Adam and Eve, but pretty much almost as old as we, the United States, are. So let's talk about that. One of the things that we're seeing people do within workplaces like never before, at least that I can remember as an adult, is organizing at even a higher level. Would you say that's true? And that's the first step to wielding your collective power?
Absolutely. I think that the interest in what a union can provide in terms of benefits for workers in their workplace is amazing. And it's funny when you said 8 hours of work, right? Workers are working more and more and more. It's rare to find a place where you're just working 8 hours a day. It feels like in some cases that we're going backwards in several workplaces, because the demand from employers is just so much more harsh and requirements of jobs. And we're not seeing, while workers are, we always hear that the American worker is one of the most productive workers in the world, and that is because we work more than most other industrialized countries, and it's requirement from our, and I think workers are looking as a way to go back and find balance again, and that balance that they found is using that collective power that you so eloquently talked about, and figuring out how do we use that collective power to try to get back to a balanced workplace again. And we're seeing that all over, certainly in several professions, in several industries, and several sectors of the economy.
Do you think this moment is unique in a sense in labor right now, and this unique moment is being capitalized upon by workers? I mean, first they're organizing, but they are seeking, rightfully so, greater protections on the job. So, in other words, do you think in a Renaissance period, or a reawakening of, hey, we need to be safer, and we can ask for these things, and we will.
It's hard to say that just now. I mean, what we're seeing is over the last several years, this resurgence of workers recognizing again the value of what a collective power can look like through a union contract. If you use collective power where people will go out on a wildcat strike for a day, or workers will walk out for a couple of hours, that's to deal with one specific instance or issue. But when we're talking about using that solidarity and collective power for long-term change in a workplace. And I think that's the difference. And so when we talk about this revival, I think the pandemic really taught workers their place in society. We all think of ourselves in the middle class, whether we make $8 an hour or we make $80 an hour. In this country. And so part of this recognition is to say that, wait, I am also part of the working class, and that a lot of what I am required to do is dictated solely by my employer. And at times that doesn't feel right, and at times what the employer dictates isn't right. And so how do we deal with this? And so for the last 8 or 9 years, we've seen this resurgence of people understanding that value through approval rates, union approval rates. Gallup does their poll every year, and that poll is indicating this rise of union approval. How does that translate into union organizing is what the age we're in now. And I think that's the difference. Approval
do you
versus
think that,
organizing.
I'm wondering, was it the hot labor market, low unemployment, or both that have helped this?
All of it. And the pandemic, all of it. The hot labor market where, employers are saying, and they are also understanding the value of their workforce, and understanding that they need to, in order to recruit and in order to retain, that they have to do things differently. And that's definitely part of it. And as a result, because of the low unemployment that's happening there, people who want to find work can find work. Employers are altering and changing, and that's why you're seeing some of these historic gains in contract bargaining right now.
You talked about the pandemic. How did the pandemic help? Is it that people, now that are saying, hey, we need these greater protections, is it that they saw that they were essential workers, but they realized how essential they were as workers?
I absolutely believe that workers understood their value in the economy and with their employers during the pandemic, when so many workers were classified as essential workers. You think about police, firefighters, healthcare as typical essentials, but we represent essential workers. We represent manufacturing workers and industrial workers as a large segment of our membership, and they were deemed essential workers. So, someone who built a compressor was deemed an essential worker. And I think people understood that as they were forced to work more and more, that they were all essential. And I think that absolutely helped with them understanding that they were absolutely needed in order for their employer to continue to make a profit and for the economy to continue to run.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're coming up on a break, but I want to point out, and I've been saying Carnegie Hall my whole life, and I always hear now on radio and TV, Carnegie. And I'm like, I
Yes.
guess I've been saying it wrong. But workers at the Carnegie Libraries in Pittsburgh, they recently organized just as the pandemic was starting. They were able to negotiate cutting edge health and safety protections and more Carnegie museums. Also, some of them shared a building with those library workers, so they organized as well during the pandemic. And while they had additional challenges, ultimately they were also able to push for greater protections, raises up to 35%. We're going to talk about that and more with Maria right after this quick break. I'm Leslie Marshall. Maria Sommab, organizing director for the United Steelworkers, is with us. Check out the USW at usw.org. Follow them on X and Instagram at Steelworkers, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Steelworkers. I'm Leslie Marshall, back after this.
If you came across someone struggling with hunger, how would you recognize them? By their clothes, their age, the way they speak? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for
summer break because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a single father of 2 who works 3
part-time jobs and still can't put enough food on the table?
Or maybe a mother who cleans offices at night,
hoping to find meeting leftovers to take home to her hungry family.
or a war veteran who's having a hard time
landing a job and getting back on his feet.
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. People you pass by every day but never knew were hungry. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America, 200 Food Banks Strong, and the Ad Council.
Mama, what does the chicken say?
Chicken. Oh, okay.
When the wolf?
Oh, a wolf. Ooh!
What about the tiny dog? Cat? Owl?
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
Dolphin? What does the turkey say? Whale?
Yeah, whale sound.
Do the giraffe?
Giraffe, really? Okay. Giraffe.
You're not going to get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff, like making sure your kids are buckled correctly in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right.
Visit NHTSA.gov/the right seat.
Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1953. That was the day 400 photo engravers at 6 New York City newspapers walked off the job. Members of the AFL's International Photo Engravers Union had just voted down arbitration. All but one local newspaper, the New York Herald Tribune, were idled as 20,000 newspaper workers refused to cross the engravers' picket lines. 6 days into the strike, that newspaper suspended operations as well. Writers at the New Yorker magazine remarked they were, quote, curled up with the Wall Street Journal, the Daily Worker, and a 2-day-old copy of Le Prince. In the decades before digital images, photo engraving was a labor-intensive process. Highly skilled workers made metal plates from which newspaper images were printed. Photo engravers had been working without a contract since the end of October. They demanded a $15 a week raise. The Newspaper Association was only willing to grant $3.75. The other newspaper unions had been offered similar wage and benefit packages far below their demands. They knew that whatever they won or lost depended on the victory of the photo engravers strike. So they walked out in solidarity. Federal mediators intervened in an attempt to settle the strike. Hysteric newspaper editors across the country shrieked that the union had accomplished what the government would never dare do: subvert the freedom of the press. They sulked that the strike had broken 35 years of industrial harmony and peace, adding that the ungrateful workers didn't appreciate just how good they had it. After 11 days, members voted to end the walkout and let a fact-finding board solve the dispute. 3 months later, the board upheld the Newspaper Association's original offer of $3.75 a week plus benefits. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
We are back. Happy Tuesday. Welcome or welcome back. Only True Democracy and Talk. Maria Sommab is our guest organizing director for the United Steelworkers. Please check out their website, usw.org. Follow them on X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at Steelworkers. And on Facebook, go to facebook.com/Steelworkers. Like and follow there. Maria, thank you for holding Welcome Back. I want to move to Washington, D.C. now, and specifically this administration, the Biden administration, and this president, Joe Biden. I think I'm old enough to remember, and looking back, that this administration and this president specifically is arguably the most pro-labor president in recent memory. Is that accurate? And is his administration and things they have done, such as the infrastructure, package, signing that into law, pushing for that? Does that help the workers to exercise their right in forming unions? And does that play into this surge of, people saying, we demand a fair wage and we want proper working conditions because we are essential. This is how essential we are.
Absolutely. I would agree with your statement about President Biden being the most pro-labor president in at least in my lifetime. I think that what he has done is put, there have been a lot of presidents who have supported labor, and I say that in quotes. And the rhetoric is there, and a lot of politicians who support the workers' rights. But what President Biden has done is actually enacted that in the pieces of legislation that he managed to get through the Congress. Really lays out what does it mean when we're talking about government expenditures and what the government is going to support? What does it mean to really use that power of the presidency and the money that comes with it through agencies and through procurement process to really support American workers and production in this country? And so what that means is that when the government is deciding if they're going to support private industry, that the requirement they can put on it is to say to those employers, you got to follow the law. You've got to allow workers to freely choose during an election process if they want to form a union or not. And if you do all that, that's fantastic, and we want to be here and support you with the public tax dollars. And I think that's fair. The other added thing that he said in all of this, all of these bills and all of this procurement money is that, is that things should be made in this country. One of the things that the pandemic taught us is that our supply chain is completely broken. We are dependent on so many different countries and imports that come in for the littlest things to large major things that help run our economies. And so that part of this money that says that if taxpayer money is going to be used, we want to make and incentivize employees to make and build things back in this country so that we're reliant upon ourselves. You add that and to say that, and the incentives around making sure that workers' rights to freely choose union representation, along with as one of the encouragements that the president has done, incentivizing that, along with the money that says, and if you do, right, here's what we're willing to do to support that and create new businesses and build back the supply chain in our country. You put those two pieces together, and you've got someone who has gone beyond the rhetoric of supporting the American worker and putting it into practice. So I think he is absolutely the most pro-labor president that I've seen in my lifetime.
Yeah, unprecedented support. Actually, I agree with you 100% there. I mean, the whole approach from the government, and to your point, this has helped tip the balance back toward the workers and away from those corporations, which certainly we know have been greedy. And I think a lot of these things are just common sense. I mean, sadly, we needed the pandemic, I guess, to wake up to that reality that if you're buying stuff from China, and why would you? I mean, there's a reason things are cheaper. I mean, you do get what you pay for to a certain degree. I always say if I buy 3 T-shirts for $10, I can wear them once because they're going to fall apart in the wash after one washing. 1, 2, you don't know the conditions the workers are working in to make those, including child labor, Uyghur labor, forced labor, indentured servitude, or even slavery. And we also why, like in China, they have this patriotism there, a surge of it, and pride that they want to make their products. They want to have Chinese products, and they want to make their products, and they want to buy their products. America, had that, for years. Not trying to date myself. When I was a little girl, I remember the song, when you are buying, look for the Union label, and I won't sing anymore. Right. But it's very true, because if you're investing in your own country, in your own economy, you're investing in your fellow man and woman, your fellow American, whether that is a big corporation or whether that is a small mom and pop, organization. You have to, look to that. We as consumers have a responsibility, and then you're also helping your own family, because everybody knows somebody who's involved in that, process of making it, even if you're part of the supply chain and buying it, right? And then if you're not buying things in China, you don't have to worry about a ship being, stuck in a port and not able to deliver the goods because of a situation with trucks to the rest of the country. You cut that out. You cut out the middleman, and you're getting a better quality made product with regulations that ensure if your toddler is chomping on that toy, they don't have lead levels that are going through the roof that are entering their body. I mean, to me, it's just all common sense. Back to the president and his administration. He did a few things, and one of which is he formed the Task Force on Worker Organizing and Empowerment. That resulted in 70 recommendations to increase visibility, support, awareness, promotion of collective bargaining, ensure effective enforcement of existing labor laws. And also, I had mentioned our infrastructure package. And, we had a D- or D+ on our best day because of the crumbling infrastructure. But to your point, the Biden administration paired that with strong Build America, Buy America requirements, talking about make it here, buy it here, and buy from those making it here, and prioritizing employers with strong labor standards. Want to point out something. Electric school bus maker Bluebird, right? They received tens of millions of dollars in support through the EPA. And when workers at Bluebird overwhelmingly voted to join the USW this past spring, their hard work coupled with the administration's efforts to ensure tax dollars went to supporting good jobs, healthier communities, and that paid off. Touching quickly before the break, there's more potential now too, because now we're transitioning to clean energy, clean technology, electric vehicles. So there's more raw materials and more jobs, right? More opportunities.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, when we think about Bluebird, and I know we're going to break, but that is one of the oldest American bus companies. There's only two large school bus companies, and Bluebird is one of them. They've been around for over 100 years. And so when those workers who attempted to organize 4 times before the Steelworkers came around and helped them were unable to do it, through kind of this incentive and through the bully pulpit of the president and the administration, the employer recognized that they had to allow the workers a free and fair election.
Absolutely.
And when they did that, overwhelmingly supported us.
Absolutely. Back with Maria Sommab from USW. Check out their website, usw.org. Follow them on X or Twitter at Steelworkers, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Steelworkers.
The Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council present the story of Tom and Levi.
Tom is the smartest man I know. He's been a professor at 2 major universities, been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, he told me that he was having problems in his classes. I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. And he was telling them that he was doing it as a favor to them, but I think in reality, he just wanted to get out of there. I was really starting to worry because I saw something was wrong.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me, and my love for him was just immense.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
What grows in the forest? Trees? Sure. Know what else grows in the forest? Our imagination, our sense of wonder, and our family bonds grow too. Because when we disconnect from this and connect with this, we reconnect with each other and build family memories we will carry with us forever. The forest is closer than you think. Find a forest near you and start exploring at discovertheforest.org. It's easy. Just put in your zip code to find family-friendly outdoor destinations near you. You'll also find guides to free activities, games, and amazing forest facts. Give the magic of the outdoors to your kids and reconnect with your family. Find a forest near you at discovertheforest.org. That's discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Growing up, I absorbed a lot of values from my old Texas daddy. A strong commitment to the common good, a healthy work ethic, and a lively sense of humor. But one thing about him I've rejected: his determination to have a perfect yard of thick, verdant St. Augustine grass. Lord, how he worked at it, laying sod, watering, fertilizing, watering, weeding, watering, spreading pesticides, watering, mowing, more watering. But it was too hot, too dry, too infested with blight, bugs, slugs, and such. He was up against Texas nature, and he just couldn't win. So I've gone in the opposite direction, slowly nurturing a natural yard of native trees, drought-tolerant plants, and a general live-with-nature ethic in my little landscape. I'm hardly alone in this rejection of the uniform green grass imperative. A spontaneous yard rebellion is taking hold across our country as more and more households, neighborhoods, businesses, etc. shift to a nature-friendly approach. A particularly encouraging push for change is coming from school kids, elementary level through college, who are appalled by the poisoning of our globe and organizing locally to do something that both makes a difference and makes a statement. One exemplary channel for their activism is a student movement called Rewild Your Campus. Of course, some people consider wild yards to be scruffy, ugly, unruly. That's their choice, but some also insist that tidy grass lawns must be everyone's choice. So they proclaim themselves to be the yard police, demanding that cities and homeowner associations make green grass uniformity the law. They file busybody lawsuits and run right-wing social media campaigns targeting people and groups that disobey. This is Jim Hightower saying, these attacks are silly because they are silly, and also because they're attacking the future. To work for yard sanity and choice, go to rewild.org. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is
Hey there, we are back. We are me, Leslie Marshall, and Maria Sommab. She's organizing director for the United Steelworkers. Please check out the website, and all the USW does. USW, and they do a lot more than you think, and a lot more than steel. USW.org. Follow them on X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at Steelworkers, and also on Facebook at facebook.com/Steelworkers. Maria, thank you for holding once again, and welcome back. One of the things we have seen, whether we watch movies like Nomadland, or whether we live in communities that we have seen affected by good jobs that can create a community, and a lack of jobs or disappearance of jobs can destroy and demolish a road or erase a community. So it's essential. It's not just that you want, a good job, good paying job, safe job, proper health care, time off, all of that. But it's essential that jobs, whether you're a miner, or you're manufacturing, from A to Z, that they're good community supporting jobs, right? I mean, because that ensures a worker that they can exercise their right to organize. Can you speak to us about that? Because, you can just have a job, but if you don't have a job with that freedom, if you don't have a job with that insurance, it's not as easy getting up in the morning and going to work.
Absolutely right. And I think that we spoke earlier in the show about how many hours workers actually spend at work. I know that a lot of the workers I talk to spend a majority of their life at work. And so when I talk to people, and there's lots of funders right now looking to fund figuring out how to involve community in all of this infrastructure money, and how do we get community organizations, and how do we get people who've been left out of this economy back into the economy. And one of the things I say is, if you want to look at a community and try to help it, then you have to help it through work, because that's where a majority of people spend their time. And the way that you can do that is through a good union contract, because there at least they can come together and ensure what you talked about, a safe workplace. People can come home alive from work, that people have vacation and holidays, and that people are paid a living wage so that they can afford to spend time with their families. All of that comes through a good union contract. And that union contract, if they help those workers, then those workers in turn will help their communities. It's age old. And when the workers don't have that type of support and infrastructure in place to help them, then communities suffer for it, because the workers are suffering. So absolutely, they're connected and tied together.
Yeah, I mean, when you want to talk about just one example, and there are many, there's one model of many that seemed to be ideal. Employers followed and continue to follow the model of Cleveland Cliffs, right? They agreed to adhere to true neutrality. They allowed workers to choose for themselves whether they want union representation. And there are other employers out there, people especially working more in the clean energy areas, whether it's rechargeable batteries or wind turbines, that could follow this example, respect their workers, because if they listen to the workers, they would have less turnover, they would have more stability in their workforce. And then they could get the money funding from the administration, that the Biden administration, is providing. It's a win-win. Why do you think that some of these companies are dragging their feet with regard to this, especially the employers that are in more of the clean energy manufacturing areas?
I think for years, unions have had such a bad rap in the economy, and employers always think negatively about us. And in a lot of cases, and I'm glad you mentioned Cleveland Cliffs, because that's an employer that we have worked hand in hand with. We represent thousands of members from their mines to the manufacturing facilities to processing facilities that they have. And we work together to make sure that that company is successful. And when they're successful through our contracts, we make sure they share that success with our miners. And so we recently did an organizing drive at one of their mines up in northern Minnesota, and that again had been tempted several times. And what we said was, just let them freely choose. Don't speak out against it. Don't hold anyone accountable. Don't have captive audience meetings. Don't do all the stuff that employers used to do, and let them choose. And they did. They respected that neutrality agreement, and they allowed the workers to choose, and we won. And they got their union in place. Now, other employers could choose to do that. We're not asking them to just hand us members. What we're asking them to do is, one, follow the law. Two, just remain completely neutral and let the employees choose. Why they don't do it? I think it's all about power, pure and simple power. Because unionized workforces and unionized employers make more money together, right? And so if they want to be a successful employer, then partner with your workers and partner with them through their union. But the employers just don't want to, companies don't want to share power. It is simply about power and doing whatever they want, whenever they want, with whomever they want. And those days are coming to an end.
Yeah, very true, especially when we look at, not just clean energy and clean energy jobs, but really where we're going as a society. We talked about China before. We talked about, making more products here, buying more products here. I think the pandemic showed us, even more so that we not only shouldn't, but we can't rely on places like China. And we can't rely on places like China if we want to meet our environmental goals, right? So if somebody's into the environment and they're, not as big on, labor, if we build our own domestic supply chain, if we lay the framework, then we know the future. We know that they're good jobs, they're good paying jobs. They have, proper health care, proper safety standards, and not just that, but, following the regulatory standards with regard to emissions and things like that, so that we reach our environmental goals. And all of that comes in an American union job, not relying on places like China. Can you speak to that, our environmental goals? Can you speak to that, our reliance on China?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that when you think about it, right, what is the environmental cost and carbon footprint of transporting an object that's been made in China that doesn't have the regulations and the environmental regulations and any of the health and safety protocols that you talked about? Think about that product that's being made over there without any of those regulations, being shipped over here, the carbon footprint, then being from the port, being trucked across the country to these stores. Right? You think about the environmental footprint that has happened over one of those T-shirts that you talked about, right? If you're an environmentalist, you really should, that all is a cost. Those fossil fuels is a cost to the environment. And so when you want to be a good steward of our climate and of this environment and our earth, you have to think about building locally. You have to think about all of that. And we can reduce that carbon footprint by creating a domestic supply chain here. And the reliance on other countries for us, again, proven through the pandemic, is that, supply chain is controlled by forces outside of outside of our control. And that is the pandemic, which is, that was outside of all of our control. There's geopolitical warfare. There's other issues that come into play when you think about reliance on countries that our times may be not so friendly to us, or that we may not be so friendly towards. And if we continue to put all of our eggs in those baskets rather than in our own basket, then we are putting ourselves in jeopardy. And so when you put the environment and the degradation to this world and thinking through the carbon footprint of importing all of that, all of those products, and you talk about the countries that are actually producing all of these things and what our relationship is like with them, you put those two things together, and what President Biden is doing only makes sense. We have to incentivize here if we want to save our planet. We have to incentivize clean technology being utilized and built here, and that that domestic supply chain is vital, not only for the earth, but vital for our economy and vital for our economic survival. To rely on other countries is just doesn't make sense anymore. It really doesn't. And so you've got a president who understands that and really incentivizing all of this, and we're so appreciative of it.
Not just our president, Joe Biden, but the current president. I want to give a shout out to the former president because of an initiative that he started that speaks to what we are discussing. Before we go to break, we talk about this groundswell of interest in organizing, and there was a new initiative to train existing members and connect them with their peers so they can answer questions, they can help workers understand their rights. That initiative was started by the USW's late president and somebody I consider to have been a great friend and certainly a great friend to the program, Tom Conway. The USW is eager to continue building it out to honor his legacy. Just this past fall, 700 workers at Bobcat in Bismarck, North Dakota, voted to join the USW, and 200 more at the Bobcat facility in Rogers, Minnesota. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with Maria. We'll be back with you right after this. Don't go away.
There are a ton of social networking websites, but one stands apart for a very special reason. This one saves lives. It's MatchingDonors.com. MatchingDonors.com links organ donors with people in need of kidney and other transplants. In the U.S., 19 people die each day waiting for an organ transplant, most of them for kidneys. If you've ever considered becoming a living organ donor, or if you have someone in need of an organ transplant, visit MatchingDonors.com. Home of the greatest gift of all, the gift of life. MatchingDonors.com.
Whoa, a new digital music player. Thanks, Mom.
Oh, I'm glad you like it, because I can't wait to toss the big stereo. And now that we got your dad that big HD TV he wanted, we can throw out our old TV, too.
Hold up. You can't just throw out electronics.
Really?
They need to be recycled or donated.
And how would we do that?
It's so easy, Mom. Today, recycling electronics is just as easy as buying them. GreenerGadgets.org has all the info. We just enter our zip code to find a certified recycling center nearby. There are thousands of them, and new ones are being added all the time. Some of our local stores are even certified recycling locations.
I like that.
Did you know that some of the stuff in our old electronics could be used to make new products and conserve natural resources?
Well, okay then. Let's gather them up. What was that website again?
greenergadgets.org. We just enter our zip code and go.
Most gasoline now contains 10% ethanol, and that's okay. Gas with higher than 10% ethanol is not okay. For your mower, chainsaw, or generator, I'm Chris Kaiser, president of the Outdoor Power Equipment Institute. What you put in your car may no longer be safe for other engines. Look before you pump. 15, 30, or 85% ethanol is harmful and illegal to use in outdoor power equipment. A consumer can find out about which fuels are appropriate at lookbeforeyoupump.com. Look before you pump. Protect your equipment. Stick with E10 or less.
Here's a clip from Tara Buster telling other Americans what other ill-informed Americans think is not news. That's why it drives me crazy about the polls when they go, oh, well, Joe Biden is very unpopular in the polls. Well, shut the up about it for once and see what happens, right? Stop saying that. Stop. How about you shut up and do some stories about let's say the $35 insulin, how it's improved Americans' lives. Or do some stories about how they're opening chips factories for once in the United States. And how that's not just good for jobs and local communities, but also national security. Do a damn story like that. Do stories on how the United States is the only damn country without friggin' health care as a right. We got this bullshit of employers giving you health insurance by complete accident. Do some stories about FDR's second Bill of Rights. Talk about that, then get the panel in to discuss it. Instead of constantly giving us polls about how Joe Biden sucks, how people don't like him. They just don't, he's not, they think he's too old, even though Trump is 2 years younger and can't bend, can't do one squat, much less a push-up. Are you kidding me? But there's Joe Biden out there riding bikes. Oh, but he fell. Please, if Trump fell, he wouldn't get up. He'd be like Jabba the Hutt. He'd just transform into a slug on the ground and say, I meant to do that. Tara Buster is recorded live every Friday evening at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at the Tara Buster Facebook and YouTube channels. We stick together, we win.
We are back. How you doing? I'm Leslie Marshall. Welcome back, and we're glad to have back with us Maria Sommab, not just back from the break, but back from being on the show in the past. Maria is organizing director for the United Steelworkers. Please go to the website, check it out. You know, I've learned a lot, from going to the website, and I know you will as well. Whether you're part of USW, you're just curious, maybe you were like, hey, benefits of being a union worker look pretty good, want to look into doing it in my workplace. Go to usw.org. Also, on X, formerly Twitter, I still want to say Twitter, X is harder to come out. On X and Instagram, follow them there at Steelworkers, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Steelworkers. Maria, thank you for holding. Welcome back. In talking about all of this, because it's our last segment in the hour, the final step in organizing, a lot of people would think, well, it was a vote, whether up or down, hopefully, successful. But actually the final step, the biggie of the final step is first that contract, right?
Absolutely. We don't, a victory doesn't change, a union election doesn't change anyone's life. A union contract does.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at a corporation, let's take Starbucks as an example. They double down on their efforts, and with the contract or leading up to the contract, they're trying to break the workers, not collective bargaining strength, but the will. They're trying to beat them down a lot of times, these corporations, when they get to the finish line with that contract, right?
Absolutely. They know that if they can't stop the election and the workers from voting for the union, they can certainly delay it and stop it through the bargaining process by refusing to bargain, with good intent, good faith bargaining. They don't.
Yeah, and you see protracted bargaining, right? I mean, we see that as Kumho, OHL, Geodis, USW ultimately successful in both those cases. Those are just two examples, but they seem to want to drag this out, and I think they think, somebody once told me the farthest you get. Well, here's an example. In my husband's office years ago when I worked there, he's a physician, and if somebody had a big co-insurance due, right, deductible, right, and say it's thousands of dollars, that some people, have, because they're having, multi-level surgery, right, and I was always taught the farthest away you get from getting that money, the harder it is to collect, and I think it's similar in collective bargaining, which I think corporations are, looking like, if you keep it going on and on and on and on, they're going to give up. They're going to get tired. They're going to forget. But that's not going to happen, especially when you have somebody like the USW backing you.
Absolutely. I mean, at Kumho and OHL, which you talked about, Kumho Tire is a tire company in Macon, Georgia. It took us 2 elections and 6 years to finally get a contract. We bargained for 2.5 years. And the entire time, the employer was still continuing to union bust there. Those workers initially, when we filled out the union authorization cards, this is an employee who fought us, not like Cleveland Cliffs who let the workers decide. Kumho fought us. And it took us, again, 6 years to achieve a contract. We had 85% support on cards in the first election in 2017, and we lost the election. We then filed for a second election a year later, a little over a year later, and we went ahead and finally won that election and proceeded to bargain. And we won the election in 2019. We didn't get to bargaining until 20, and it's been now really 2023 since they ratified their election just a few months, ratified their contract just a few months ago. That's how long that process took. And OHL was longer. And we're just now achieving a final TA. They will go through a ratification vote, I think sometime this week or next week. And that was over 6 years of bargaining after the election.
Over 6 years. So let's talk about, we've talked about what workers have done. We've talked about what the administration has done. We've talked about some successes with some, different companies, Buy America, clean energy. But something that workers definitely need is something that would help them successfully weather these challenges that we talk about that they face, along this very sometimes long path to getting what they deserve is the PRO Act. I'm sure you would agree. Could you tell our listeners and viewers a bit about the PRO Act and why it's essential for workers and their success?
I'm so glad you brought it up. I think that, people think, well, you're allowed to organize under the law, the National Labor Relations Act. But what they don't understand is that the employers don't care about that law. And that law has been, changed and altered, not the law itself, but the case law around it and how employers can act and what's illegal and what is legal has changed throughout the years. And so this process has been broken for a very long time. Right now, it's extremely difficult to organize. People think that you just hand out a flyer, you go to an election, and it happens. It's often a long, arduous process where the employer intervenes and bullies workers and really, fires and terminates workers, has massive captive audience meetings, disciplines workers, changes shifts, do all sorts of things during this entire process.
Also reclassifying them, right? I mean, you're full-time and all of a sudden you're like a freelancer.
Absolutely, right? You become a 1099er. There's misclassification of workers has been a many decades problem and something that I hope that we'll fix at some point. But the PRO Act really looks at a lot of these different points that are the most egregious and hard for the workers to actually organize and tries to fix them, right? And so they then, underneath the PRO Act, it really puts some harsh punishment for the employers who break the law. They're not changing what breaking the law underneath the NLRB looks like. What they're saying is that there aren't enough harsh punishments. And if you break the law, you should be punished harsher. That it really is illegal to constantly be bullying these workers. The other thing that the PRO Act really does is to try to get the NLRB's process to be quicker and to speed up that process and to make the elections easier to get to without unnecessary employer delays. And right now the Act allows a lot of, National Labor Relations Act allows a lot of that. But to me, like I said earlier, one of the key components of the PRO Act is that you don't change people's lives until you get a contract, not winning an election. And the PRO Act addresses that. It allows for mediation and arbitration to come into play in order to ensure that workers who have fought hard through this arduous process actually achieve that first contract in a timely manner. So those are really some key components to the PRO Act, and one that isn't outrageous. Although the employers in corporate America will cry, this is horrific, the worst thing possible to American industry, and it's absolutely not true. The PRO Act makes common sense things to put into place to control how employers have been illegally breaking the law for decades. And the PRO Act is trying to put some balance back into the system.
Yeah, I mean, there have to be meaningful penalties against these employers who are practicing illegal things, bullying the worker that is trying to unionize and intimidating workers out of forming a union. I mean, you want to talk about that. That's what was happening back in the day on The Gilded Age that I'm watching on HBO, and things until things turned around. And also the National Labor Relations Board, right? Their election process, that needs to be updated so that workers can petition to form a union, get a timely vote without unnecessary interference from the employer or the delays that we talked about. And improvements to mediation, arbitration language, all needed in order to ensure that newly organized facilities can reach that first contract. Yeah. With less than 60 seconds, less than a minute before we finish the hour, what would you like to leave our viewers and listeners with, Maria?
I'd like them to know that there's hope out there and that we've got a president who's created an opportunity for workers to freely choose. And I'd like them to know that there's labor unions out there who are committed to them and their communities and making sure that we're able to help improve their lives. We really need to, it doesn't come naturally by itself. You need to fight. And so if workers are willing to stand up for their rights, their community's rights, and helping improve their lives, join us in this fight to make sure that they have what they deserve.
Well said. Maria, love having you on. I'm glad you came back and you had the time. I appreciate you taking the time today. I know you're very busy. And also because we're in holiday season, so a lot of us working, double and triple time because to make up for all the time we take off for holidays, right? Maria Sommab, thank you for joining us. Organizing director for the USW. Check them out on their website, usw.org. On X, formerly Twitter and Instagram, follow them there at Steelworkers, and follow them on Facebook, facebook.com/Steelworkers. Want to thank Maria, want to thank my executive producer, Mark Grimaldi, and all of you listening and watching. I hope you have a wonderful, safe rest of the day. I'm Leslie Marshall.